The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. I sat in the armchair that had been mine for years, its leather worn and familiar. But somehow tonight it felt foreign. My name is Vernon, and for 12 years, I thought I had a good handle on life. A decent job, a cozy house, and my wife, Marlene, who I believed was my partner in everything. But something had been gnawing at me for weeks. It started small. A lingering glance at her phone, late nights at work that stretched into the early hours, and the scent of cologne that wasn't mine. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to paranoia or my own insecurities. Marlene had always been good at explaining things away, and I had always been good at believing her. Tonight, however, the air in the house felt different. She was pacing near the front door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. A small suitcase sat by her side, its presence like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She turned to me, startled, as if she hadn't expected me to notice. "I told you, Vernon, I'm spending the weekend with Clara." Girls' trip, remember? Clara, her best friend since college, a name she always seemed to hide behind when she needed a convenient excuse. I nodded slowly, my gaze steady on her. "You're sure about that?" Her eyes darted away just for a moment, but it was enough. I knew Marlene well enough to recognize when she was lying. Still, I let the silence stretch between us, hoping she might fill it with the truth. But instead, she sighed, exasperated. "Vernon, can you not make this a thing? I need some time away, just a couple of days." I stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of her. "Is this about him?" I asked, my words deliberate, heavy. Her face froze, the blood draining from her cheeks. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Who is he, Marlene?" I pressed. "And don't lie to me this time." She hesitated, her hands gripping the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not what I think." I let out a bitter laugh. "You've been sneaking around for weeks, lying to my face, and now you're walking out the door with a suitcase. What am I supposed to think?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "His name is Gerald," she said. "We've been talking, spending time together, and yes, I care about him." The room seemed to spin, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Gerald. A name I didn't recognize, but one that would now haunt me forever. "You care about him?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "And what about me, Marlene? What about us? Do 12 years mean nothing to you?" She looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "I've been unhappy, Vernon, for a long time. I didn't know how to tell you." "So you decided to tell me by walking out the door with your suitcase packed?" I asked, my voice rising. "Is that it? You're just going to leave?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. "I need to figure out what I want," she said. "I need space." I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. "Space," I muttered. "You want space to figure out what you want? Well, let me make it easy for you." I pointed to the door, my hand trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Fine. Go. But the moment you step out that door, Marlene, our marriage is over. Don't ever come back." Her eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected me to say it. She stood there for a moment, frozen, before finally picking up the suitcase and walking to the door. She hesitated with her hand on the knob, glancing back at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Vernon," she said softly. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. But this wasn't the end. Not for me and not for her. Because what Marlene didn't know was that I had my own secrets, and now that she had crossed the line, it was time for me to take control of the narrative. The moment the door closed, the silence in the house became unbearable. For 12 years, I had built my life around Marlene, trusting her, believing in us. Now, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sank back into my chair, staring blankly at the empty hallway where she had stood moments ago. I thought about Gerald, a name I'd never heard before, now etched into my mind like a scar. How long had he been part of her life? Was it weeks? Months? Longer? My thoughts swirled, each one darker than the last. I needed answers, but I knew Marlene wasn't going to give them to me, not willingly. After a few minutes, I stood up, my movements stiff and mechanical. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and took a long sip. The burn felt good, sharp and grounding, pulling me back to reality. I wasn't going to sit here and wallow, not yet. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen counter and opened it, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had never been the kind of man to snoop, but tonight was different. Tonight, I had no choice. Logging into our shared phone account, I began scrolling through the call and text logs. It didn't take long to find Gerald's number. His name wasn't listed, but the frequency of the calls and texts told me everything I needed to know. Late-night conversations, long calls during the hours Marlene claimed to be working late. It was all there, laid out in cold, hard data. My stomach churned, a mix of anger and heartbreak twisting inside me. But then I noticed something else. An address. One of the texts from Gerald included a location pin, sent just last week. My heart raced as I stared at it, debating what to do. I wasn't a confrontational man by nature. I had always avoided drama, preferring to keep the peace. But this wasn't something I could ignore. Gerald wasn't just some abstract idea anymore. He was a real person with an address, and I needed to see for myself what kind of man he was. Without giving myself time to overthink, I grabbed my jacket and keys and headed out the door. The drive to the address was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing with possibilities. What would I say? What would I do? I didn't have a plan, just a gnawing need to face the man who had inserted himself into my marriage. When I arrived, the house was dark, except for a single light glowing in the living room. I parked across the street, sitting in my car as I tried to steady my nerves. Was this really the right thing to do? Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but the other part, the part fueled by anger and betrayal, wouldn't let me. I got out of the car and walked up to the house. My footsteps felt heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the door, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorbell. This was it. No turning back. Before I could press it, the door opened. A man stood there, mid-40s, with a confident smirk that made my blood boil. He was taller than me, with a neatly trimmed beard and a casual demeanor that screamed arrogance. "Gerald, can I help you?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe as if he owned the world. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Are you Gerald?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Depends on who's asking." I clenched my fists at my sides. "I'm Vernon, Marlene's husband." For a moment, a flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He straightened up, crossing his arms over his chest. "Well, this is unexpected." "You could say that," I replied, my tone sharp. "I'm here because I want to know exactly what kind of man thinks it's okay to insert himself into another man's marriage." Gerald chuckled, a low, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. "Look, Vernon, I didn't come looking for Marlene. She came to me. Maybe you should be asking yourself why that is. His words hit like a slap, but I refused to let him see how much it hurt. "You're a coward," I said, my voice rising, hiding behind excuses and justifications. "If you had any integrity, you'd have stayed out of this." He shrugged, unfazed. "And if you were doing your job as a husband, maybe she wouldn't have come to me in the first place." I wanted to hit him. Every muscle in my body screamed for action. But I knew that wasn't the answer. Violence wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I took a step closer, meeting his gaze head-on. "You've made a mistake," I said quietly. "You think you've won something, but you have no idea what you're getting yourself into." He smirked again, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No," I replied. "It's a fact." Without another word, I turned and walked away. My heart pounded in my chest as I got into my car and drove off. I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Gerald might think he had the upper hand, but he didn't know me, and he didn't know what I was capable of when pushed to my limit. I drove home in a haze. Gerald's smug face burned into my memory. His arrogance, his dismissive tone, and, worst of all, his attempt to shift the blame onto me. It was infuriating, but beneath my anger was something far worse. Doubt. Was there a part of what he said that was true? Had I missed something in my marriage that had driven Marlene away? The house was cold and silent when I stepped inside, an eerie contrast to the turmoil in my head. I poured another glass of bourbon, the sharp burn grounding me as I stared at the empty space where her suitcase had been. I couldn't let myself fall apart, not yet. I grabbed her laptop from the counter and powered it on. We rarely used each other's devices, but tonight was different. If she thought she could hide her secrets, she underestimated me. As the screen flickered to life, I navigated through her email and social media accounts, my pulse quickening with every click. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a hidden folder in her email titled Personal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were dozens of messages, all from Gerald. The subject lines alone were enough to make my stomach turn. "Last night was incredible. I can't wait to see you again." And the one that hit me hardest, "When are you telling him?" I opened the emails, each one more damning than the last. Gerald wasn't just some fling. He was a calculated choice, a man she had been seeing for months behind my back. He knew everything about me, my work schedule, my habits, even the little things like how I liked my coffee. It was as if he had studied me, dissected my life to find ways to insert himself into it. But then, one email caught my attention. The subject line read, "About Vernon's account." My heart raced as I opened it. The contents were brief but devastating. "Don't worry, I've taken care of everything. He won't even notice. Once the transfer goes through, we'll have enough for the down payment. Just stick to the plan." A cold realization washed over me. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was financial. She was siphoning money from our joint account. My money. I immediately logged into our online banking, my hands shaking as I navigated to the account history. There it was. Multiple small transfers over the past few months, all to a suspicious account I didn't recognize. Together, they added up to a staggering amount. Rage surged through me, but I forced myself to think clearly. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. This was about protecting myself from whatever she had planned next. I printed out the bank statements and the emails, creating a file of evidence. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure I was ready. But there was something else. Another email from Gerald mentioned a hotel, the Crescent, downtown. The email was dated just a few days ago, and it included a time and room number. My mind raced. Was this where they met? Was this where she planned to go after leaving tonight? I couldn't sit still. The idea of them together in some room laughing at my expense was too much to bear. Grabbing my car keys, I headed out, the cold night air biting at my face as I drove to the hotel. When I arrived, the lobby was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I approached the front desk, trying to appear calm as I gave them the room number. "I'm here to pick up something my wife forgot," I said, flashing a friendly smile. The receptionist didn't even blink. "Of course, I'll call up to confirm." Panic flared in my chest, but I kept my composure. "No need." She told me she'd leave it at the front desk. "Room 214, right?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Let me check with housekeeping." While she turned away, I quickly glanced at the sign-in sheet on the counter. Room 214, Gerald. My blood boiled as I saw his name scribbled next to hers. Moments later, the receptionist returned. "I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing here for you." "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No," I said through gritted teeth, turning to leave. But as I walked away, I couldn't resist one last glance at the elevators. The thought of confronting them crossed my mind. But I knew it wasn't the right time. Not yet. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just an affair. This was a betrayal on every level. Emotional, financial, and personal. And if they thought they could walk away from this unscathed, they were sorely mistaken. I wasn't the type to act impulsively, but that night, I made a promise to myself. They wanted to play games? Fine. But I would make the rules, and I would make sure that when this was over, they'd regret underestimating me. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with 100 different scenarios, each one more infuriating than the last. Marlene hadn't just betrayed me. She conspired against me, draining my bank account and sharing my life's secrets with a man who mocked me to my face. I couldn't let it go, not this time. Back home, I spread out the evidence I'd gathered, the emails, the bank statements, and that cursed room number. It was like looking at a roadmap of betrayal. But it wasn't enough to just know. I needed a plan, something that would turn the tables and force them to face the consequences of what they'd done. I picked up my phone and made a few calls. The first was to my bank. I froze all joint accounts immediately, ensuring not another cent could be touched. Next, I called my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to Dan in years, but he answered on the second ring. "Vernon, it's late. What's going on?" "It's bad, Dan," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I think Marlene's been stealing from me. I've got the proof, and I need to know what my options are." Dan didn't hesitate. "Come by the office tomorrow morning. Bring everything you've got. We'll figure this out." The final call I made was to a private investigator. If Marlene and Gerald thought they could hide anything else, they were wrong. I wanted everything. Where they went, who they talked to, what their plans were. I wanted to know it all. By the time I hung up, it was past midnight. I should have felt some relief, but the weight in my chest hadn't eased. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. Marlene had taken everything I'd worked for and thrown it away. If she thought she could walk away clean, she was in for a rude awakening. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a single thought echoed in my mind. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I met with the private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Ellen, who had a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I handed her the emails, the bank statements, and everything I'd found. "I want to know everything about them," I said. "Where they go, what they do, who they talk to. Leave no stone unturned." Ellen nodded, flipping through the papers. "This is a good start. I'll get to work immediately. You'll have updates by the end of the week." Her confidence gave me some hope. As I left her office, I felt a small flicker of control returning. For the first time in days, I wasn't just reacting. I was taking action. That afternoon, I met with Dan, my lawyer. He went through the bank statements with a practiced eye, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is serious, Vernon," he said. "If she's been transferring funds without your consent, we can file for financial misconduct in the divorce proceedings. But you need to be careful. Don't confront her directly until we've got everything in place." Divorce. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Despite everything, part of me still clung to the hope that this was all some horrible mistake, that Marlene would come to her senses, but the rational part of me knew better. She'd made her choice, and now I had to make mine. As I left Dan's office, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I even opened it. "You really shouldn't have come to my house. This isn't going to end well for you. Gerald." His arrogance knew no bounds. I clenched my jaw, my resolve hardening. He thought he could intimidate me, scare me into submission, but all he'd done was fuel the fire. "You're right," I muttered to myself, deleting the message. "This won't end well for you." The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet preparation and unease. Ellen, the private investigator, worked fast. By Wednesday, I had my first set of updates. She handed me a folder as we sat across from each other in her small, dimly lit office. "Gerald's not as clean as he wants you to think," Ellen said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "He has a record: small-time fraud, embezzlement, and a lot of debt. My guess? He's using Marlene as his golden ticket." I opened the folder and scanned through the evidence she'd gathered. Photos of Gerald at a high-end restaurant with Marlene, bills he paid using her card, and a list of aliases he'd used in the past. Each detail painted a picture of a man who preyed on vulnerability and lived off others' money. Ellen continued, her voice steady. "He's good at what he does. Builds trust, takes what he needs, and moves on. But he's sloppy too. He's made mistakes, and those mistakes could be useful for you." The anger inside me grew with every word. Marlene hadn't just betrayed me. She'd thrown away everything we'd built for a man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. And the worst part, she didn't even realize it. "Keep digging," I told Ellen, my voice firm. "I want to know everything. Where he's been, who he's conned, and what his next move is." She nodded. "You'll have it." That night I sat in the living room staring at the file. Gerald wasn't some irresistible man who had swept Marlene off her feet. He was a con artist, a leech, and she was just another mark. But there was something else in the folder that caught my attention. A receipt for a jewelry store. He purchased an expensive necklace using Marlene's money. The date on the receipt matched the night Marlene told me she was working late. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the lies layered on top of it. She had looked me in the eye that night, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she loved me, all while Gerald was slipping that necklace around her neck. I clenched the papers in my hands, my frustration boiling over. But then an idea started forming. Gerald was smart, but he wasn't infallible. If I played this right, I could use his arrogance against him. I grabbed my phone and called Ellen. "I need you to find out one more thing," I said. "What's that?" she asked. "Where Gerald keeps his skeletons," I replied. "Everyone like him has a weak spot, and I need to know where to push." The next morning, Ellen called me with more information. "You were right," she said. "He's got a safe deposit box at a bank downtown. There's no way of knowing exactly what's in it, but based on his history, I'd bet it's where he keeps his insurance. Documents, valuables, anything he doesn't want anyone else to see." "Can we get to it?" I asked. Ellen hesitated. "Not legally, no. But if you're thinking about leveraging this, you'll need more than just knowledge. You'll need to catch him red-handed. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Gerald had underestimated me, and now I had the upper hand. All I needed was a way to draw him out. Later that day, I got an unexpected call from Marlene. Her name flashing on my phone sent a jolt through me. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Vernon," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. I think we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, my grip tightening on the phone. "Talk about what?" I asked, keeping my tone cold. She hesitated. "I feel like things got out of hand. Maybe we can figure something out." I almost laughed. The audacity of her to call me after everything she'd done, to act as if this was just a misunderstanding, was unbelievable. But I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine," I said. "Come by tomorrow evening. We'll talk." When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Marlene's hesitation meant she wasn't as confident in her choices as she wanted to appear. She was cracking, and I intended to exploit every weakness she showed. But I wasn't naive. This wasn't a gesture of reconciliation. Marlene wasn't coming to fix things. She was coming to test the waters, to see if she could manipulate me back into her corner. And I was more than ready for her. As I prepared for the meeting, I realized that everything was starting to fall into place. Marlene thought she could control the situation. Gerald thought he was untouchable. But they had no idea what I had in store. The following evening, Marlene arrived exactly on time. She always was punctual, a trait I once admired. Now, it felt calculated. She walked into the house like a stranger, her posture stiff and her eyes darting around the living room as though she expected something or someone to jump out and shout at her. "Vernon," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "Thanks for agreeing to this." I gestured for her to sit on the couch, keeping my expression neutral. "You wanted to talk," I said, sitting across from her. "So talk." She hesitated, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "I think we rushed into things the other night." I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I leaned back, arms crossed. "You didn't mean to tell me you've been seeing another man for months, that you've been lying to me, stealing from me, and planning to walk away with everything we built together? Which part of that didn't you mean?" Her face flushed, but she quickly composed herself. "It's not that simple, Vernon. I wasn't happy. We weren't happy." "Speak for yourself," I said sharply. "I wasn't the one sneaking around, Marlene. I wasn't the one siphoning money out of our account or planning a future with someone else." She flinched, but didn't deny it. Instead, she shifted tactics. "Gerald isn't who you think he is," she said. "He understands me in ways you never did." I barked a laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, I know exactly who Gerald is. A con artist, a liar, a man with a record longer than my patience. Did you even bother to look into his past before you threw away your life for him?" Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, letting the silence hang between us for a moment. Then I tossed the folder Ellen had prepared onto the coffee table. "Take a look," I said. "That's your knight in shining armor. Every lie, every scam, every person he's burned through before moving on to his next victim. And guess what? You're just another name on his list." Marlene hesitated, her trembling hands reaching for the folder. She flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. This isn't real," she stammered. "You had someone dig into his life?" "This is insane." "What's insane," I shot back, "is you putting your trust in someone like him and expecting me to just roll over and take it." You thought you were in control, Marlene, but you were just a pawn in his game. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen this act before, the way she weaponized vulnerability to get what she wanted. Not this time. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Gerald. He said he'd take care of everything. He said I could trust him. "And you believed him," I said, my voice ice cold. "Just like I believed you." But trust isn't something you get to break and rebuild whenever it's convenient for you. It's gone, Marlene. You made sure of that. She stared at me, her tears now falling freely. "What do you want from me, Vernon? Do you want me to beg, to apologize? Is that what this is about?" I stood up, looming over her as I pointed to the door. "What I want is for you to leave. You and Gerald deserve each other, and I want no part of whatever disaster comes next. But don't think for a second that this is over. I've frozen the accounts, I've spoken to a lawyer, and I've got everything I need to make sure neither of you walks away with a dime of what I earned." Marlene's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She was searching for a response, for some way to claw back the upper hand, but there was nothing left to say. Finally, she grabbed her purse and stood, her movements jerky and uncertain. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You think you're so righteous, but you're not perfect either, Vernon. You'll see." I didn't respond. I simply opened the door and waited. She stormed out, slamming it behind her. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. But I knew this wasn't the end. Marlene wasn't the type to go quietly, and Gerald would undoubtedly try something once he realized the accounts were frozen. As I sat down, Ellen's words echoed in my mind. "He's sloppy." Gerald had underestimated me, and so had Marlene. They thought they could outsmart me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Now, it was my turn to act. The next day, I received Ellen's final report. She had uncovered enough evidence to confirm my suspicions. Gerald wasn't just having an affair with Marlene. He was using her for financial gain. His past was riddled with financial schemes, unpaid debts, and manipulation. What struck me the most was a string of messages between him and another woman, one Marlene clearly didn't know about. It was the same routine he had likely used on her: promises, sweet words, and eventually, access to money. He was preparing his exit strategy, and Marlene was just another stepping stone. I sent copies of the evidence to my lawyer, who assured me that this would work in my favor during the divorce proceedings. "This strengthens your case, Vernon," Dan said over the phone. "If she's been misusing joint funds for someone else, you may not owe her anything." That was all I needed to hear. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that Gerald would eventually try to take what little money Marlene had left and disappear. He had done it before, and he would do it again. So I made sure she found out the truth before it was too late. That evening, I sent Marlene an email. No anger, no insults, just the cold, hard truth. "Marlene, you think Gerald is your future, but he's already preparing to leave you. He's done this before, and he'll do it again. Attached is everything you need to see for yourself. What you do next is up to you. Vernon." I attached the messages Ellen had found. Conversations between Gerald and another woman discussing money, trips, and plans for a future Marlene wasn't a part of. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one, but I knew she saw it. 2 days later, Marlene showed up at my door. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Vernon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Talk about what, Marlene?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "You were right about everything." I said nothing. She took a shaky breath. "Gerald, he's gone. He took the money, everything I had left. And now I have nothing." I studied her for a moment, but I felt no satisfaction, no joy. Just emptiness. "You still have your choices, Marlene," I said flatly. "You made them, and now you're living with them." She let out a small, broken laugh. "I was such a fool." I didn't disagree. She wiped at her face, looking at me with something close to desperation. "Vernon, I know I don't deserve it, but can we fix this? Can we?" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "There's nothing left to fix." She swallowed hard. "Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." "That's not my problem," I said. "I already filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact you soon." She stood there for a moment, as if she still couldn't believe what was happening. Then finally, she nodded. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I watched as she disappeared down the street, and just like that, the weight I had been carrying for weeks lifted. This wasn't the ending I had imagined, but maybe it was the one I needed. A week later, I finalized the divorce papers and started moving forward. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As for Gerald, he was already gone, probably on to his next victim. But I wasn't concerned about them anymore. I had a future to build, one without betrayal, without lies. And this time, I would make sure I surrounded myself with people who truly deserved to be in my life.